Hello, I'm Roderick. Yeah, you know, I was going to say, there's the first row.
Sir, the offering is over. Kalis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the commemoration, the anniversary of the 74th year of the Battle of Manila. First, I want to thank the Navy and the Marines for their job here this morning. Very impressive. Thank you very much. They had to leave, so they're leaving us time to do our own thing here. Thanks again. Anyway, I need to recognize a few people here before we start. Ms. Pilar Cuadra, the First Secretary in charge of Cultural Affairs of the Embassy of the Kingdom of Spain. Ms. Tracy Betts, Director of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. Constance Santos, Change Management Agent, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Skaggs, U.S. Assistant Army Attaché, Mr. Guilherme Acido, who I understand is not here this morning because he's sick, but he's the administrator of the Intramuros administration. Doctora Flor de Sta Isabel, Señor Museo ng Maynila. Emily Young of the YG Chinese Guerrillas. Miss Tessie Angsi of the Kaisa Heritage Foundation, Inc. Attorney Tranquil G.S. Salvador III of the, oh, this is a hard word, Tagapagtaguyod ng Sine at Kultura ng Pilipinas. And Professor Satoshi Nakano of the Bridge of Peace. I also would like to acknowledge Mrs. Lourdes Montimola, who is one of our past presidents and one of the founders of the organization and one of our lights. So Lourdes. Anyway, I read an article last week in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, dated February 6, written by Manuel L. Quezon III. As you all know, Manuel is a very established journalist and television personality, and I think he's in the audience here today. There he is. His article was titled Chronicle of a City's Agony. He used the phrase in the article, the Great Remembering. I really like that phrase. In reference to the 50th anniversary of the battle in 1995, when the survivors of that battle began sharing their memories and accounts of what happened here. I really like the phrase, the Great Remembering. It sort of opens up a lot of things. MEMORARE, by the way, was formed that same year by the same group of survivors that started to put their memories into paper. Their great amnesia, their pains, their terrible memories of the event began to be shared. Manuel's articles talks about a series of books that were printed about the battle, leading to the latest book, Rampage, MacArthur, Yamashita, and the Battle of Manila. The author of the book, James Scott, will be our guest speaker today. He's also in the audience, obviously. Someone else will properly introduce James to all of us in a few minutes, so I will keep my comments on him short. Anyway, I think you've read a lot about him in the last few days, because he's been in every newspaper article I can think of. I would say that I have read the book. In fact, I read his draft back in March of last year when he sent a copy of the draft to one of our directors and one of the survivors of the battle, Jim Litt. I don't know if he's here today, I haven't seen him. In my opinion, one of the best books I've ever read on the battle and the events that took place before and after. And I think I've read quite a few of the books. Maybe not all, but quite a few. I was very surprised in the book to read that James mentioned several of my aunts, my mother's sisters, in his account of the Bayview Hotel incident. While I had heard about what happened there from my parents and my aunts, those stories were always purposely muted, stunted, and not well explained for good reason. So the revelation to me, and my sister, who happens to be also in the audience, was very, very interesting. It's an excellent read, and I highly recommend it. At this point, I would like to thank Rod Hall for his efforts in bringing James here to give his lectures to our youth in several universities, FEU, UP, La Salle, Ateneo, USD, and maybe one other that I have missed, and to be our guest speaker. So I want to thank Rod very much for that. That's outstanding. I mean, what a job. Anyway, I started coming to MEMORARE commemorations about 15 years ago. Sitting where you are today, I would listen to our president, Juan Jose Rocha, Johnny, ask, maybe even better said, demand a formal apology and a recognition from the Japanese government for what the Imperial Japanese troops did here 74 years ago. Sadly, Johnny passed without receiving that apology. And today it hasn't come. And there are pretty good indications that it probably will not come. And I've never understood the reason or the reasons why. We all know what happened here. So does the Japanese government. It's incomprehensible, it doesn't make any sense. As president of MEMORARE today, I will continue to ask for that apology. The survivors have waited long enough. Many have passed on without hearing it. The great remembrance has happened, and their stories have been and are being told. And the apology is long overdue. However, last year, I mentioned that there was hope that this eventuality happening I said that because the young Japanese are beginning to learn about the events that happened here. A young lady, Naoko Jin, founder of the Bridge for Peace, started the process, and perhaps a snowball effect is beginning. At least I hope so anyway. We must thank her and her organization for their efforts at achieving closure. She cannot be with us today, but Professor Satoshi Nakano, who you saw deliver the flowers here a while ago, will be here and will speak to us shortly. As most of you know, this commemoration today is a culmination of events that have taken place this week, 4 or 5 days. On Tuesday, February 12, James Scott's book was launched in the Philippines at the Philippines Heritage Library Ayala Museum. This has been followed by a series of lectures given by Jim to students at 7 different universities in the Metro Manila. I kind of pity him because he must have been in traffic. It's not funny. Anyway, he was doing 2 to 3 lectures a day. In our situation here, that's pretty good. MEMORARE's primary focus and purpose is to remember the events of February 1945, the death of 100,000 civilians, the destruction of a beautiful city, the hurt, suffering, and trauma of the survivors. We want to remember so this never happens again. We want to honor the innocent dead and wounded of that terrible month. And of course, we want to remember the survivors. At the question and answer period of the book launch on Tuesday, a question was asked about what the reason why we're here in the Philippines have such a poor memory of the war. I paraphrased the question, but it was something like that. James answered it by saying that historical events are in the past, and the youth tend to look at the future. And I think he's probably right. Then it's incumbent upon us to educate the next generation about the rampage that took place here 74 years ago, so our nation will never forget. And I think this past week's events certainly lead towards that goal. Hopefully this will lead or begin to lead to an awakening in our youth. And I think it may be happening. I've noticed a series of newspaper articles from many journalists and many opinion writers, all talking about the book and all talking about the Battle of Manila this past week. I think that's great. So anyway, before I close, I want to make mention and thank several people. This past week, the events of this past week do not happen in a vacuum. Many people are involved in making it happen, and I want to thank some of them anyway, because they really worked hard for it. Now, you had to set up schedules, you had to set up emails, telephone calls, appointments. All of that doesn't happen by clicking a finger. It happens by people calling and working. And so I want to especially thank John Orendine, who's MC today, Suzanne Yupanco from the Ayala Museum, Desiree Benipayo, who really worked very hard to put up our posters, Dr. Rico Jose, obviously, for doing what he does best. Also like to thank the Intramuros administration, Guilherme Sido, although he's not here today, for their support, and of course, Dr. Villa Senor, because again, all of these things here we see today cannot happen, or would not have happened without their help. Lastly, James Scott. I think his book launch here, I think, is going to lead to a springboard or a jumping point or a way to open the eyes of our youth, maybe of our education system, to tell us, to explain what happened here, to remember it. And he has been a wonderful tool, let's call it that, for getting it started. So James, thank you very much. Okay, that's enough. I'll let you go with that. Thank you very much for coming here, and good morning.
May we please ask Ms. Chari Ortigas Montilla to give us a short prayer.
Prayer for victims and perpetrators of injustice. For all those who have fallen victim to hatred and inhumanity. For those loved ones who are left behind to mourn. For the souls of those whose hearts are cold. Lord, hear our prayer. For the children who were born into this world of conflict and violence, for women and mothers who suffered needlessly, Lord, hear our prayer. For the healers who found the courage to tell the world their truths about the Battle of Manila. For the children who cried in their beds at night, reliving the horrors of what they had seen done to family and loved ones. For the mothers and fathers who tried to explain the unexplainable, Lord, hear our prayer. For all the children who have died before their time, for the soldiers who allowed their uniform to strip them of their humanity, for the redemption of the souls of both victim and perpetrator, for those who commit themselves to the forgiveness of sins, Lord, hear our prayer. Amen.
May we please hear from Dr. Flor de Lis Villaseñor, who will deliver the message of the Mayor of the City of Manila.
Good morning, everyone. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, the MEMORARE Foundation, Inc., ladies and gentlemen, I was personally asked by President Mayor Joseph Ernesto Estrada to read his message for you today. And so I read. Good morning. Our solemn gathering this morning marks the 74th year of remembrance of one of the bloodiest 28 days of the Pacific War. In that brief period, more than 100,000 civilians lost their lives in a bloody massacre led by the Japanese Imperial Forces. Looking around us today, it is hard to imagine how such a horrific event could have happened here in Manila. The Manila that is the capital of the Philippines. The Manila that is a cultural and historical center. The Manila that is a hub for business, commerce, and tourism. Our streets are now paved. Our thoroughfares well lit. Our community is safe and secure. But that was not the Manila of 1945. And those 28 days in 1945 didn't happen. And after more than 7 decades, it remains a deeply painful personal memory for those who lived through it and those who lost loved ones from it. We are here today to honor the memory of those we lost in our remembrance. We also offer a silent prayer for their repose and for peace and serenity to reign in the hearts of those who continue to mourn them. But from grief, there comes acceptance, then the willingness to be reconciled with the past, and finally, there comes a sense of purpose. This we see in all we are here today. We will not forget the past, because it is the lessons left by the past which inspire us to work together and to unite so that nothing like that ever happens again. If I may, I would also like to extend my gratitude to Mr. James Scott, who is with us today. Mr. Scott's Rampage, The Battle of Manila, MacArthur, and Yamashita is a current bestseller in the United States and offers a fresh look at the episode in our history. Based on the massive interest his book has generated, I can only say that there are many who now seek answers on this chapter of our past, one that has somehow escaped the scrutiny of the world until now. On behalf of the City of Manila, thank you, Mr. Scott, for shining the light on this episode in our history. And thank you to the MEMORARE-Manila 1945 Foundation and to all our guests here today. As Mayor of Manila, I join you in honoring the memory of all those who left us too soon so that they may live forever in our hearts. Thank you and good morning. That's the message of His Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liz, and thank you also for all the arrangements of the Tagapagtaguyod and the Navy, the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Marines. May we call on Bridge for Peace Representative Professor Satoshi Nakano to deliver his message.
scholars, MEMORARE-Manila Foundation, and all the distinguished participants and guests coming here. It is my great honor to speak in front of you as a member of Bridge for Peace from Japan at this anniversary memorial commemorating the innocent victims, non-combatant men, women, children, and infants killed in Manila during its Battle of Liberation, February 3 to March 3, 1945. Here, allow me to tell a rather personal story, since I think it is a good way for us to share how significant achievement has been brought about by the MEMORARE-Manila fight for remembrance since the dedication of this memorial statue in February 1995. 24 years ago, I was here as a visiting scholar from Japan and had an opportunity to attend the dedication of this statue and the following Requiem Mass held at the Manila Cathedral. There, the prayers of the faithful, just like this morning, I've heard, and one of which addressed to the Japanese perpetrators was read by Mr. Fernando Vasquez Prada, who was 5 years old at the time of the De La Salle College massacre and the sole survivor of his family of 6. That is, for those who killed and raped and slaughtered, that they may acknowledge their guilt and seek forgiveness, let us pray to the Lord. Since then, I've never forgotten and will never ever forget this phrase. At that time, the Philippines media coverage of these commemorative events was large enough to mark the beginning of restoring the battle's place in the collective memory, while there was no coverage at all on these events in Japan, nor would be any for years to come. This is the starting point of the battle against forgetting. I think it is fair to say that MEMORARE's tenacious effort for remembrance or protest against forgetting has been bearing fruit to a significant extent in mobilizing the media and scholars, not only within but also outside of the Philippines, to devote more attention to the battle and its historical significance. And here, my heartfelt congratulations to Mr. James Scott and the publication of Rampage. It should also be remembered that in 2006, on the 61st anniversary commemoration, Japanese Ambassador Ryuichiro Yamazaki attended the gathering for the very first time and only time as the Japanese ambassador. He took the opportunity to make the following statement. With this historical fact in mind, I would like to express my heartfelt apologies and deep sense of remorse over the tragic fate of Manila. Let me also reiterate the Japanese government's determination not to allow the lessons of that horrible World War II to erode and to contribute to the peace and prosperity of the world without ever waging a war. Whether official or personal, that should be judged by you. The ambassador's significant statement was not given any considerable coverage in Japanese media at that time. This lack of publicity has long limited the Japanese public's awareness of what happened in the Philippines during the war to this date. There have been signs of regaining awareness. In August 2007, the first ever major TV documentary on the battle was produced and aired in Japan. And since then, there are several other documentaries made and aired in Japan. And it certainly contributes to the increasing awareness of the Japanese public on the battle, if not enough. Another development was, of course, that MEMORARE found its Japanese counterpart in Bridge for Peace, a small, non-profit peace advocacy group of Japanese led by the young individuals in their 20s and 30s. The group was organized in August 2004 by Naoko Jin, Then, a 26-year-old Japanese woman, she launched the project collecting video messages of the ex-Japanese soldiers, including many who admitted their guilt and sought forgiveness, and bringing and showing those videos to the Filipinos war survivors and the victims' families. The group, though small, has attracted considerable attention from Japanese media, mainly because of the uniquely non-partisan and useful character of the group and its activities. Then Bridge for Peace received an invitation from MEMORARE-Manila to attend this annual commemoration ceremony on February 2011, 8 years ago, and has been invited to every annual commemoration gathering since then. Another unexpected development I would like to introduce is that January 2016, on the occasion of Japanese Emperor and Empress said visit to the Philippines. Upon his departure for the Philippines from the Haneda International Airport in Tokyo, the Emperor made a televised address to Japanese people, officially referred to as His Majesty's words, Okotoba, in front of the Prime Minister and others. The Emperor said that during World War II, countless Filipino, American, and Japanese lives were lost in the Philippines. A great many innocent Filipino civilians became casualties of the fierce battles fought in the city of Manila. This history will always be in our hearts as we make this visit to the Philippines. The Emperor's mention of the Battle of Manila was entirely unexpected and irregular, since it was unprecedented for the Emperor, for the Japanese Emperor, to refer to any particular events of war in this way in any of his addresses. The Battle of Manila, in that sense, suddenly brought out of the decades of amnesia to the recognition in Japanese official memory. This imperial statement finally and eventually restored Japanese public memory on the Battle of Manila and the Philippines. Not enough, I should say. Overcoming amnesia in Japan has been and should be the most important part of protest against forgetting on the Battle of Manila tragedy. Success so far has been made possible because of the MEMORARE-Manila's unique way of fighting against forgetting by quiet persuasion or civility, if I may say. And I, as well as my colleagues from Japan here, cannot be more proud to be a part of this fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nakano, for that well-researched, lovely address. Now, let's hear from another professor, Dr. Rico Jose, who's the Philippines' foremost historian in World War II in the Philippines. He will welcome our guest speaker and introduce him.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to this ceremony. My task is to introduce Mr. James M. Scott. And James M. Scott is well known to military buffs. He has written 3 books prior to this rampage. And for those of us who read war books, those 3 books were very well received. The first one was the attack on the Liberty, which was an Israeli attack on an American ship some time ago, many years ago. The other one was The War Below, about American submarines in the Pacific War. And the third one was Target Tokyo, which brought new light to the Doolittle raid on Tokyo in April 1942. He is a best-selling author. All 3 of these books have broken records, very well received, very well researched. I first met Jim several years ago when he was doing research for Rampage, and I was impressed by the information he had gathered and his research techniques. He's an investigative journalist. He started as an investigative journalist, which probably explains his own research method. He's always stuck to primary sources, particularly the materials written at the time or shortly after the time. And he was here to interview veterans, those who experienced the war, and so forth. So the book that he has written, Rampage, is the first very thoroughly written book that's published in the United States. There was another one published in the 70s, but it was a terrible book. So this is the first time that the American public is actually seeing it, and fortunately for us, it's also available now here. I hope there will be a chance to translate it into Japanese and make it accessible to the Japanese audience as well. But it is a landmark book. I know the research that went into it. It was very professional, very balanced. And so with that, let me introduce James M. Scott.
Thank you, Dr. Jose. Those are very kind words coming from someone as esteemed as Dr. Jose is. He is truly one of the finest historians in the world for World War II. And so it's been a real privilege and a treat to get to know Rico over the years and collaborate on our studies on this. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank a few people. First, I'd like to start off with Rod and Connie Hall, who have been instrumental. They're founders of the organization MEMORARE, and when I mentioned to Rod last year that my publisher was thinking about doing a launch in Manila, he immediately seized on the opportunity and ran with it and said, you know, we'll take this on, and everything that's happened this week. This is we've done 10 university and museum talks this week, and all of that has started really with Rod and Connie taking this. I'd also like to thank the other board members of MEMORARE who've been tremendous. Joan in particular, who has literally worked tirelessly to arrange all of these events. It's been sort of a logistical Jenga game, if you will, trying to stack everything up in a limited amount of time, and she's done a tremendous job for that. So thank you. I'd also like to thank the City of Manila for the kind remarks earlier today and for welcoming me here. It's been a real treat to come back. And of course also to the Bridge for Peace and to Dr. Nakano for his very lovely remarks this morning that I think are very important and spot on, and that we need to remember them. It's a privilege and an honor to be asked to come speak today as we gather to mark the 74th anniversary of the tragic Battle of Manila. I'm not Filipino, I'm an American, but we come together today because suffering knows no nationality. Anguish and grief, no border. What happened here more than 7 decades ago instead harbors lessons for people and leaders of all nations. As CBS News correspondent Bill Dunn once observed, quote, the Manila of 1941 was a unique Manila, a Manila that had never existed before, a Manila that would never exist again. Few cities in the world have suffered like Manila. The former Pearl of the Orient, once the star of steamship ads and tourism brochures, endured 3 brutal years of Japanese occupation, following the withdrawal of American forces. During that time, enemy troops harassed residents, commandeered homes, and looted department stores. Grocery store shelves sat empty and fields rotted. The Japanese so mismanaged the Philippine economy during that time that it led to widespread starvation and the unraveling of the nation's social fabric. To survive, many resorted to thievery, including the plundering of graves in search of gold teeth, jewelry, dentures, even eyeglasses. Desperate parents, meanwhile, abandoned their children to orphanages or even sold them. The liberation of the city, which most hoped would at long last bring an end to the years of fear and misery, instead only compounded that tragedy. Japanese forces, rather than evacuate Manila, as Douglas MacArthur had expected, instead hunkered down inside government buildings, homes, hospitals, even the dugouts at Rizal Memorial Stadium. In a battle fought building by building and even room by room, American troops had no choice, but in the words of one Army report, to quote, exterminate the enemy in place. Amid this ferocious fighting, Japanese soldiers and Marines committed some of the worst atrocities of World War II. Troops tossed babies in the air, skewering them on the tips of their bayonets. Others torched entire neighborhoods like Malate and Ermita, and decapitated men by the hundreds and raped scores of women. American forces did their share of damage as well, firing 42,000 mortar and artillery rounds into the city. When those guns finally fell silent on March 3rd, 1945, 29 days after the American cavalry had rolled into the city, Manila was gone. The battle to liberate the capital had flattened 613 city blocks, an area containing 11,000 homes, schools, churches, and businesses. Quote, "There seemed nothing left even to mourn," recalled Abraham Hartendorf. Manila, he observed, remained a name only. And beyond those structural losses were the cultural ones. Gone were the centuries-old Spanish churches. Gone were the museums filled with paintings and sculptures. Gone were the libraries and archives that housed priceless literary works and the historical records of a nation. The battle not only robbed Manila of its past and its heritage, but also its future. Amid the rubble and wreckage lay the lawmakers, doctors, teachers, and inventors, as well as moms and dads. That priceless human capital, those men and women upon whose shoulders had once rested the future of a soon-to-be independent Philippines. The Battle of Manila was unlike most others of World War II, a battle born entirely on the backs of civilians, on the men, women, and children. 100 Filipinos died for every one American soldier. 6 Filipinos died for every one Japanese. And even though more than 7 decades have passed since the last shot was fired, the Battle of Manila still echoes today. The scars can be found throughout the city, from the flagpole at the U.S. Embassy, still riddled with shrapnel, to the empty lot where the German club once stood. And beyond those physical scars are those soft tissue wounds of grief and sadness that never truly heal. Angie Abad Santos, in a MEMORARE questionnaire filled out a half-century after the war, captured the suffering of so many when she described the ache she felt over the loss of her father and brother. Quote, "The pain is still there," she wrote in 1995. "The nightmares are still there. The dreams that they may suddenly come back alive and well. I have had those dreams for the last 50 years." Even though the United States and the Philippines have long since repaired relations with Japan and moved on, it's imperative that we remember and that future generations learn precisely what happened here. That's why the mission of MEMORARE is so vital, now more than ever, as survivors sadly dwindle. I applaud the efforts of Rod Hall, his sister Connie McHugh, and the late Ambassador Johnny Rocha in founding this great organization. They've been aided over the years by a tremendous board, including Dr. Lourdes Montanola, Jose Cabarrus, Joan Orendine, Jim Litton, Drs. Rico Jose and Benito Lagarda, Albert Montilla, Edgar Crone, Carlos Perez Rubio, Nick Inchowski, Manolo Quezon, Isabel Wilson, and of course Desiree Benapayo. I know every one of them, so humble and generous, would shy away from being singled out this morning. But it has been through their years of dogged work that we have this beautiful statue here in Intramuros, the historic heart of Manila, and where more than 4,000 people died in the days leading up to the siege of the walled city. It's through monuments like this, as well as books, lectures, symposiums, public archives, that we can continue to preserve and highlight the story of the civilian sacrifice during the city's liberation. Manila, after all, is an example of the tragedy and the futility of war. A reminder not only of lives lost, but of lost opportunity. Daniel Burnham, in outlining his vision for this city 114 years ago, compared Manila to Naples, Venice, and Paris. I often wondered, as I pored over historic photographs and maps, what Manila would be like today, if not for those brief weeks in February 1945. when the storm of war descended upon the Pearl of the Orient? Where would this city be had the Japanese not gone block by block, burning Malate and Ermita? Or if American howitzers had not reduced the once grand neoclassical buildings to rubble? Those 29 days are a fulcrum on which the history of this city and its people forever changed. And it's up to us today, for future historians, writers, filmmakers, and leaders to continue to tell this story. In closing, I want to recall the words of Serviano Aquino, one of the few survivors of the massacre at De La Salle. Caught by the Japanese on the second floor at the entrance to the chapel, Aquino was bayoneted so forcefully that the muzzle of the Marine's rifle penetrated his shoulder. Afterward, badly wounded and bleeding there on the tile floor, he watched, powerless to intervene, as the Japanese murdered his wife and in-laws. And during the years of my research, I read literally thousands of pages of victims' statements and depositions. But it was a brief few words uttered by Aquino in 1949 that I feel best summarize what happened and serve as a legacy of that battle. In a way, he said, we were all massacred. Only some of us were fortunate enough to have lived through it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scott, for that very, very meaningful message, giving us very many new perspectives. Manila loves you. With that, we thank all of you for coming this morning, and we close this program. Thank you.
Yeah, but he's been my boss for 2 years.
Come here.
I didn't know that. And that's not something he can't let go of. It feels like that's his sanctuary. Teaching is his passion, life purpose, more than being a boss. I'm not surprised. The place of death was important.
Wala signal sa job.